Welcome to Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy, the podcast where insights and innovation meet. Every episode, we dive into conversations with industry leaders, experts, and change makers, bringing you the stories and ideas in the renewable energy sector that shape our world. And now, let's jump into today's episode with your host, Wes Ashworth. Welcome back to Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy. Today's guest is Kevin Galloway, Vice President of Product at Electra. Kevin is a distinguished engineering leader with more than 15 years of experience developing and scaling advanced electrochemical systems and sustainable technologies. At Electra, he has played a key role in helping transform the company from its early startup phase into a fully operational enterprise focused on decarbonizing the steel industry through clean energy innovation. Before joining Electra, Kevin held leadership roles at AES Distributed Energy, Stack Energy, and Vision Energy. Kevin holds a Bachelor of Science in Engineering Physics and a Master of Science in Material Science from the Colorado School of Mines. In this episode, we'll talk about Kevin's journey through startups, what it really takes to thrive in early stage companies, why steel represents such a critical climate challenge, how Electra thinks about impact at a high level, and why Kevin remains optimistic even as the clean energy landscape goes through cycles of hype and uncertainty. With that, Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Wes. It's great to be talking to you today.
It's a pleasure to have you on. I'm definitely excited about this topic. I don't think we've talked about anything like this before on the show, so this is always a really exciting one for me. But before we get there, I want to start just with your personal journey, how you ended up working at the intersection of clean energy, startups, and heavy industry. So really, you built that career around electrochemical systems, from fuel cells to grid scale batteries. I guess what first pulled you into this space?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've always been sort of an engineer at heart. Growing up, I like to take things apart, put them back together, building Legos and inventing things. My friend and I actually took apart a lawnmower and made a go-kart out of it when we were growing up. And so I always had that kind of engineering spirit. Went to Colorado School of Mines, which is an engineering school. I got a really good foundational learning and background in physics there. But a degree in engineering physics, a lot of people ask, well, what do you do with that? And I was asking myself the same question when I graduated, and I got drawn into material science. I think what really drew me into that was being able to go beyond theory and to do something tangible. The structure property relationships with how you process a material. We would melt metal, and depending on how you processed it, you'd get different properties out of the material. That kind of real tangible, direct kind of learning and experience drew me in. I always knew I kind of wanted to work on renewable energy in some way or form. When I was in physics, I thought I'd work on solar panels.
Yeah.
Solid state physics is crazy. It's hardcore. It's really just out there in terms of how you think about inventing new materials in that space. I learned about fuel cells and material science, and I got into that. Being able to build not just the fuel cell itself, but the test stand and characterize the material, it really drew me in.
Hey, it's cool. It makes a lot of sense, but it's always interesting to me how that early curiosity often ends up shaping an entire career, even maybe when you don't realize it at the time. But it's cool that thread's been there from really early on with you. So, all that's really cool. I know, so in a previous conversation as well, you said Electra started in a garage, literally, building prototypes with auctioned equipment, which I think is so cool. But what do those early days feel like, and what made you take that leap full time?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about looking back 6 years and where I was in my life and making that kind of a decision. I had a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old. I had a job with a great company in the renewable energy space, AES Distributed Energy. And Sandeep, who I'd worked with at a previous startup, approached me and said, hey, do you want to help me get this thing off the ground? I got a really great idea how I can make a big impact with iron. I said, yeah, I can find some time for you on that. That's interesting. Let me help you out with that. Nights and weekends I can give you, but I got a full-time job. I got a family. Yeah. And yeah, we were going on auction before we were in the garage, getting equipment on auction. I put in my own money to buy some of this stuff to see it get going. We rented a U-Haul. We moved it ourselves into a pole barn for storage because that was going to be safe for when we got out of the garage and moved into a lab. And then we just started building the team. We started building the prototypes in the garage. And those nights and weekends were just a ton of fun. Lunch breaks even. It was just a ton of fun. Being with folks that had a lot of passion and drive and didn't care about the risk. They were really invested in seeing this thing work and trying to get it off the ground. It's an addicting atmosphere. I think that the more and more we progressed in the team that we built, I realized I was getting addicted too. And I quit my job. I quit my job and jumped into the garage and helped this thing get off the ground. And it sounds crazy, but it was that kind of atmosphere and enthusiasm and passion and drive. And we're going to change the way that things are done. It was really just, like I said, addicting, and pretty easy choice for me, was as crazy as it sounds at that time.
Yeah, it's so cool. I love those stories, and I think there's some really powerful about kind of those early stage moments, and when really belief and momentum matter just as much as resources. And yeah, what other people might see as crazy, it's like you've got the belief and it's you've got the momentum behind it. Like, I love that. Looking back again, like kind of over, some of your previous experiences, how did those early kind of battery and microgrid experiences shape the way you lead product development today?
Yeah, I've been really blessed in my career to see things like from very early stage, when a company's first forming and you're scraping stuff together just to get the early prototypes on the bench running, to prove a concept, to now you've actually got something worth a full-blown product design. You're actually going to make it and scale it up. All the testing that's involved to validate the design, getting your first version of the product out. And then after that, having to operate it and continuing to operate it. I've seen that across a range of different startups in different phases of their growth. And I've been really lucky to see each of those stages occur, and each one has its own sort of flavor and interaction as it moves from one stage to the next. And I think that perspective has helped me, help me understand what kind of types of teams we need to build when, what type of focus the company needs to have at different stages of that development. And each part has its own version of fun that comes with it. It's just a little bit different. So the whole time you don't have any revenue, the whole time you don't have any money coming in, and you're trying to get to that point. So time is of the essence no matter what in that entire cycle. And that urgency and that, the drive to get things done quickly, I think has to be part of the equation.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can really hear how those experiences just created a foundation, not just technically, but just in how you think about teams and decisions and systems and those sort of things as well, too. And in addition to startups, like we said in the intro, you've also spent time in large organizations like AES, for example. What did you learn there that maybe confirmed like startups were your real home?
No, I really appreciated my time at AES Distributed Energy. I got to work on a really cool project. They are a renewables energy supplier. What I really appreciate about that company is they own and operate the facilities that they build. So they have a vested interest in the renewable energy that they develop actually, getting into people's hands and making a difference. It is a large organization, and they have a lot of developing projects in process, and a whole procedure and process for how to go through and get those things done. And my role in that was really to integrate a lot of vendors, technologies into a package that we could then go deploy at a project. And what I realized when I was doing that is all this really cool tech was coming together, and we were bringing it together to provide a solution. I wasn't part of the core development of any of those technologies, and that's really where I think my passion lies. Is I wanted to make that core technology or invent that core technology that AES is going to buy and integrate and go deploy. And I think that was a realization I had, that I want to be like on the inventive side, on the early side, on the development side of those products. And that's really in the spirit of what startups do. You're creating something new and challenging the status quo. And that's, I think I realized, is a little bit of a mismatch for someone like me, and where startups are really a great fit. And that's kind of why I've been in it. Not kind of, but really why I've been in startups my whole career.
Absolutely. I think the contrast between environments is helpful to hear. And I think people are kind of hardwired one way or the other. It's good to experience both. You kind of find your passion and the way, what makes you tick and those sort of things too. So that's cool. You were able to really find that, uncover that, learn great things from that environment, but also, ultimately find your home. One thing that stands out to me too is just how intentional you are about, the environments you choose with that, and knowing like this startup vibe is more your space. But I think that leads naturally into startup life itself and what it actually demands from people and how that works. So you've called startups a concentrated skill building experience, which I would agree. What do people misunderstand most about working in an early stage company?
Yeah, and as I've recruited for various startups, it's a question that comes up a lot, is like, hey, startups are risky, right? Like it seems to be a lot of risk with startups versus a big company or an established organization. And I just have like a fundamentally different view of risk. Maybe that's useful to share, but when you're a startup, you're inventing something new, you have no revenue, you start out, there's no product, there's no guarantee the company is going to be around in 5 years or even 2 years. And so you have to ask yourself, well, why would I do something like this? But you know what? The investor knows this. The investors that invest in startup know this. The founder knows this. The people who join startups and have been in startups and are veterans, they know this as well. And it's not about that job security, actually. When you're in a startup, it's actually about, it's a really accelerated way to develop your tool set and your skill set as a professional. You get exposed to a lot of different aspects of the organization all at once, and you get asked to contribute the best you can to every element of that. I think that broad perspective you get to have working with, as an example, in the early days, you design the part, you buy the materials yourself, procure the materials yourself, you build the materials yourself, you test the materials yourself, you analyze the data yourself. And in each one of those steps, you can kind of go back and say, well, why did I design it that way? This thing's hard to build. Or why did I design it this way? The thing is expensive. And then, man, when I go to test this, I should have designed this in because it makes it easier to test. The data and everything else comes together. You get that perspective across the range of the development cycle. And that really augments and accelerates your learning and growth as a professional. I think that just comes with a perceived level of like uncomfortableness, and that you'll be asked to do things you've probably never done before. But when you do that, you grow and you learn, and you'll fail and you'll learn from that, and you'll be better for it. I think that's why you get that opportunity in a startup that really I don't think exists in well-established processes and well-established organizations, which is really unique. And that's where I think that the risk is worth it, because you develop yourself professionally. It's not actually a risk. You're more marketable. You're growing and learning at an accelerated pace. You actually come out, if the company goes away, you come out better and more mature.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such an important reframe. I love the way you put that and explain that kind of through and through, especially for people who only see startups through the lens of risk. I think there's a lot more to it and what you get out of your development and as you said, through marketability after that. So when you are hiring, knowing, like it's got to be right, how do you decide if someone is or isn't a good fit for startup life?
Yeah, especially in the early phases of startups, it's actually hard to find people to even apply. You might have a website that has a vague idea what your mission statement is, but doesn't describe exactly what you're doing because you're developing the intellectual property. And you get people in, and there's a question of like, what is the mission here really? What's behind it? What's the approach? And so first, the hardest part is actually getting people to step in and apply, because there is a sense of risk even just there. But once we get people in, generally the interview process is really to understand how people approach solving problems and what the thought process is and the logic is behind solving problems they may have never seen before, or asking questions that we know you probably don't know the answer. We just want to evaluate what your thought process is. And it's interesting to screen people that way, because it becomes very clear people with innovative thought processes that think outside the box, that love a challenge and want to think of things maybe differently, versus, well, I don't know how you would do that. That sounds hard. You'd probably need to find some expert, someone else to go do this for you. That's a really good indicator, I think, of if you have the entrepreneurial spirit, or the ability to face challenges head on and want to find solutions.
Yeah, and I appreciate how you kind of frame that and around like the ways of thinking, how their brain works and how they solve problems, how they go through it. I like that a lot, and not just focus on like the resumes or skills or those sort of things, but really kind of seeing like, how does their brain work, and is this a good fit? When you think about your own leadership, what maybe like scars or lessons from past startups just have shaped the way you build teams now?
Yeah, I mean, I've done the gamut to date, and that my latest role is probably the most people that I've been a leader of in my career. And I've led small teams. I've been also an individual contributor. I'm leading leaders at this point. And over that evolution in my career, I think what's been interesting and even a struggle for me is to really transition from being a technical contributor and using my technical abilities to solve problems, to really focusing on enabling the team to do that work for the organization and not doing it directly myself. And along the way, what you have to do is establish a trust in your team to do the right thing, because you would do the right thing, but you have to trust someone else to do it for you. And that's a really important part of the team dynamic, is that trust. And really the core function you begin to serve is less on a technical front and more on enabling your team, making sure that they have the right tool sets, breaking down any barriers that exist to them executing and doing their job, and really being a cheerleader for the team, recognizing the success and learning from the failures and letting people fail and grow because of it. And I think that's been an important part of my journey. Learning that failure is okay has been an important part, and learning that in a leadership scope, I think was pretty critical part of my growth.
Yeah, a lot of wisdom there. I heard somebody say at one time, it's letting go of the vine. That's the hardest part. And I agree. Like I've seen that so many times, but it's never easy. It's always a little painful, but you start to see the power of it, when you start to let it go and you start to see other people kind of rise to the occasion and start empowering them as well too. But yeah, not easy, but I think you hit nail on the head there. Exactly. And the willingness to question assumptions as well, and kind of the way you go about things and just rethink how things are done is exactly what I think led you into an industry that most of us, rarely stop to think about, which is steel, and looking at what you do. So I wanted to spend some time on that and kind of like, core of what your product is and how you're doing that and the technology, those sort of things. But you said you hadn't thought much about steel before Electra. We mentioned some of your past experiences, but what surprised you most when you dug into the industry?
No, certainly. I think, the way that this all kind of came into our purview is I had experience with iron and trying to develop a battery that was based on iron and use that for grid level energy storage. And when Sandeep approached me about this opportunity, he said, I want to do something really cool with iron for steel. And you don't really think about steel as it's hard to look around anywhere in this world, in this office, outside of this office, in any city, and not see steel somewhere. It's ubiquitous. It's all around us. And it's a major commodity, and a very large amount of this material is consumed globally and produced globally. And I didn't really think about the process for making steel and how impactful that process is. It touches our lives in so many ways, but really the core part of the process, it's a very energy intensive process. Really the core part is getting iron for the steel. Steel is over 98% iron, and that iron comes from ores and rocks and is extracted using a large amount of energy. The typical, incumbent way of doing that is using fossil fuels. And what sort of struck me was the realization you learn is that 2 tons of CO2 are emitted for every ton of iron produced that goes into the steelmaking process. And wow, that's a lot. But man, you know how much steel we consume. That process is like 10% of the world's CO2 emissions. And so just the scope, the vastness of the impact in that industry is massive. And so that was really something that struck me. I thought batteries was going to be a big thing to go work on. And then you talk about steel and it's like, holy cow, this is a massive, massive impact that we want to challenge the way that that's done. And we want to change the way that's done. This could have massive impact for the world.
Yeah, huge impact. I mean, I think one probably most people don't think about when they think about CO2 emissions and climate change, those sort of things, like the impact of these types of industries. But I love being able to really make just a significant contribution to that and what you're doing in a way that's not as traditional. Most people are like, hey, I'm going to go in solar, I'm going to go in batteries or what have you. But so cool. I do want to pause for a second just to understand briefly, maybe not like highly technical or anything like that, just what Electra is doing, in terms of like what's different from like a traditional steelmaking, company that's out there. What are some of those like differences in how that's reducing that carbon footprint or CO2 emissions?
Yeah, and this is part of what we learned. I think when we started the company, we were on a thesis that we wanted to impact iron. Iron was really the problem statement when you talk about the overall waste generation from the process of making steel. And what that led us to is evaluating the value chain for iron. And where it starts is at a mine, and ore is mined in order to get enough quantity of iron in the rock that's sufficient to go into the process for iron making in a blast furnace today. But even at the mine, when you look at what's done at the mine, a lot of material is mined, a lot of energy is expended and effort to get at that material that's sufficient. But there's all the material that doesn't get passed forward in the process and ends up as tailings. And if the material has to be upgraded, additional, waste streams and tailings are produced. So there's this inefficiency in the way, even at the mine, the way that iron is making its way into first the blast furnace, where then again it's basically upgraded. Iron is reduced to metal. There's waste streams from that process that are generated. both material and greenhouse gas waste streams. And then it gets to the steelmaking process. When you're in the steelmaking process, there's additional waste streams that are had because of whatever purity of materials is feeding forward into it. And so when you look at the wide value chain, there's a lot of areas where waste is generated. Yeah. And what our proposition was let's develop a solution where not only will we remove greenhouse gas waste emissions, but can we make more efficient use of the materials as they pass through the value chain? Can we process materials that were not normally able to be processed from the mine so that the mining yields are higher? Can we pass forward a more pure product to the steel makers so that they're not generating waste and that they can make more efficient use of their resources? And so I think we wanted to produce a holistic solution where we're using renewable energy, but we're also minimizing waste across the value stream and increasing efficiency. And so it's just a broader value proposition versus solely greenhouse gas abatement. It's also touching different parts upstream and downstream of how ultimately the efficiency of making steel.
Yeah, I think that kind of like holistic and systems level thinking, as you just kind of like you're looking at all of the pieces of that, it, to me, feels essential when you're trying to solve problems, especially at this scale. So those maybe that aren't as like into it and maybe aren't as informed, like what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about steel's role in climate change?
Yeah, I think there's just like I said earlier, I don't think you realize how much steel is made globally. It's 2 billion tons of steel made globally. Yeah. And the incumbent primary process for doing that is one that uses coal. Metallurgical grade coke is produced, and you light that on fire, you generate CO2 in the process, you're making iron metal. That metal then goes into steel making. And it's a very energy intensive process. I think a lot of process routes there, they happen at very high temperatures. This is like 1600 degrees Celsius where these processes are occurring. So massive amounts of energy going into making steel. And the approach that we're taking is one where we want to have a low temperature process. We want to have one that's compatible with renewable energy sources, one that you can turn on and off if you need to, if the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing. And so I think that's one aspect of it. The other aspects are really like just if you go to a mining site and you see what we're doing to get at that very critical resource for us, you just see the massive scale. You can see these sites from space. It's pretty incredible to think about what all goes in industry to realize this material, this very important material for a society. Just the global impact that has is pretty significant.
It's huge. I mean, and I really do think that kind of clarification is really valuable, especially for people, outside of heavy industry that don't think about it every day, don't see it. So when you zoom out, I think for me, as we talk through, so it becomes clear that steel isn't just a technical problem. It really is a systems problem, and brings us to how Electra really approaches its work at a higher level. And we started to touch on this. I just want to dive a little bit deeper into it. So you've described Electra's philosophy as solving one problem without creating another. And you started to touch on that there. And I love this thought. But how does that philosophy just guide your product decisions?
Yeah, it's really core to our mission statement. And I'll give an example of how we think of it. When you get iron ore from the ground, it's not pure iron ore. It comes with other impurities in it. One of the impurities that comes with ore is alumina. It's an aluminum oxide. And in today's processes for making the iron from that ore, that aluminum oxide comes out ultimately as a slag in steel making or in iron making and becomes a waste stream. It comes out with silica and other impurities in the ore, and it's really a very low value. So it gets discarded as waste. There's another process that we use called the Bayer process to get alumina out of ores in order to make aluminum for like aluminum cans, aircraft, and aluminum metals. And that process takes in these ores, and iron is impurity in that process. And iron comes out as a waste stream. It's actually a pretty hazardous waste stream in red mud. And so we have one process where we're taking ores and trying to extract the iron, and we create alumina waste. We have another process where we take ores and we try to get alumina and we make iron waste. Fundamentally, when we think about it, we should be using those ores and getting both of those materials out as products, not as wastes. And so that is really core to the process that we've developed is we will take these materials in and we will extract the most amount of value that we can from them. The alumina in our process that is normally seen as an impurity actually becomes a product. The iron becomes a product. The silica becomes a product. And in this way, we're reducing waste. you could go about a process where you solve maybe the emissions issue with producing iron, but create a lot of solid waste in that process, or maybe hazardous waste that you have to store somewhere. That's not a great solution. For us, we don't want to create one problem while solving another. We need a holistic solution that really addresses higher material usage efficiencies.
Yeah, I love that so much. I think that kind of principle-driven approach seems especially important when the stakes are this high. And I think from, our history where maybe we didn't think that way of just kind of like, yeah, we solved one problem and it created others, it was kind of like ignore and override, move forward. But you being very holistic and thinking about that. And I think it's smarter and more efficient, but also, more sustainable and those kind of things too. So I appreciate that. And the practical examples too, really walking through it. From a product leadership standpoint, what were maybe some of the hardest non-technical decisions that you had to make as Electra moved from idea into this real company and starting to scale?
Yeah, the non-technical ones are the ones I'm still learning on how to solve those. I'm very comfortable in the technical challenges and addressing those. But certainly, I think one of the challenges we had as an organization is when you're in the process of scaling up your tech, and you get a lot of momentum behind it, and a lot of work goes into getting it to a certain place in the scale up process. And we were there with our technology last year. And we were basically getting ready to launch it and go to the next phase and a demonstration. And this is a lot of money. It's a lot of effort that's gone in to get to that point. A lot of design work and finalization of these things. And we had some work that came out of the R&D group. It was a game-changing innovation that we were seeing great results on the bench scale. And you're devoting all of your resources towards a path and a drive in the organization. A very critical thing for us to achieve in that next level of scale up. But it looks like you have something that could potentially change the game and make a better solution overall and simplify our process. And so we had to figure out how do you make a decision between the momentum and the trajectory that you're on, and you have a lot of effort and want to say attachment from the team to that direction because of all the effort that's gone into it. And you have to figure out, is this the right decision? Do we pivot here? Do we do it now and set ourselves up better in the future and take that risk? It's only been proven at bench scale. So it was really a difficult decision for us to decide to make a pivot and then redirect the team off of all of the momentum we had developed on one scaled up process that was working, but towards going backwards in some essence to scale up another newer, better way of doing it. That's not something that you get taught, and how to convince people it's the right thing to do. I think that comes along with the idea that you really need to trust each other. You trust your leadership the same way that you as a leader trust your people to do the right thing. And I'm proud to say the team came together and turned around this pivot so rapidly and executed so cleanly towards scaling that up. We really didn't miss a beat in our timing and schedule for scale up. We were able to secure grant funding to take our technology to the next level, to a demonstration facility. And it was really just an amazing achievement that really. It started with something technical, having to transition a team's thought process and having to transition all of our resources off of one thing and onto another, because resources aren't, especially in a startup, aren't infinite. The way that we were able to pull that off and do that is one of the things I get really excited and jazzed about telling people.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, those decisions really, to me, often end up shaping a company just as much, if not more, than the technology itself. Sometimes they are the most difficult ones to make, but I think even more so the power of having the right people in place, people that are kind of bought in and willing to go the direction, stick to it, rowing in the same direction type of thing. But I love that. I think that's a key fundamental trait at the companies that really get off the ground and make it. So when you're looking at this, like, how do you measure success? Maybe not just technically, but in terms of like real world adoption and industry impact. What does success look like?
When you're in a startup, you're looking to change the status quo. You're looking to change something that's been done before. We know how to do. We could just keep doing. You're going to fundamentally change how that's done. And I think for me, success looks like that. Seeing the things and the work that you put in, all the effort and passion of the team that goes into developing the tech. To me, that success is really taking it to that level where it can have an impact in the world and influence the way that we do things. You may not take over the entire market, but if you influence the direction of an industry, that to me is success, because that's what we all set out to do in the first place, was change the game and question the status quo. Not for me as much about, did you get the market cap? Did you get some level of profitability? Of course we want to increase the value of the company for our investors, but the real bars of success for me is like, did it make a difference in the way that we go after problems, in the way that we're doing things in the industry?
I like the way you put that. I think keeping the focus on that impact, right, and the direction and those sort of things, rather than these hyper specific milestones or something like that. I do think you're out to sort of change the world in a lot of ways. You have big impact type of stuff. It's ambitious, which I love, and I think building something this ambitious also means playing a long game, especially when you're working with physical technology rather than software. And you've said that, kind of like physical products require different investors than software. And I agree. I've seen this, and we talked about this a little bit before, but what do the right maybe investors look like when you're doing something like this, and how do you find them?
Yeah, I've certainly seen, a diversity of investors and startups. And I think, we carried some of the scar tissue forward, including our founder and CEO, Sandeep. From previous experiences there and an understanding of like what an investor is really looking for. I think we've really built an incredibly strong investment group. Really, the way to think of an investor is they're an extension of the team. They need to be as vested in the solution you're developing and wanting to make that change that you're driving towards as much as you do. Really, when you talk about physical tech or deep tech and the type of change that we're talking about making, it's not the type that happens overnight. You don't get an ROI in 3 to 5 years on this type of thing. So you really need an investor that understands that knows that this is a long-term process to develop and change an industry, and is willing to be there with you and hold your hand through on that journey, and also open doors for you, open doors into the industry and help you develop the right strategic mindset on how to go deploy and how to go scale up, get you the right partners so that if you're lacking in one area, maybe of your expertise, you can get access to it and through networks. So I think that more than any time in my career, the team on the investment side and the investor side that we've been able to build, strategic investors and financial investors, them sharing that vision and being invested, not just in money, but also in our success and driving for our success. I think that's been a really awesome thing to be a part of.
Yeah, it's so good. I think that alignment piece, feels like something people probably often underestimate early on, and they're more aligned to like, oh, I just need an investor. I just need an investor. But having that true alignment, I think it's really powerful, and enables you to do a lot more. So as you've gone through this several times, like what advice would you give to other founders in hard tech about choosing the right capital partners? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I think you want to look for investors, like I said, that share your passion and mindset of like, how do you want to actually impact the industry, and are less focused about when is liquidity day, when's an ROI, what's that looking like. Of course, there are times and places for that type of investment. But really, at the beginning, in the early stage, you want a partner. You want a strategic partner. For us, one of the key things I think that Sandy did a great job was he looked at the whole value chain of the impact we were trying to make for steel, not just of iron making going to steel making, but also upstream. Who is mining the ores? What are the challenges that are faced at the mine? And how do we become a partner both upstream and downstream? And how do we get the right players and investors on both sides? And it becomes a very powerful situation where you got more pull than you have push in the industry. So I would say if you can find the people that share that passion, but also have access more broadly than you might be thinking on your impact.
Yeah, it's really good. I think a lot of people kind of go through it and learn that the hard way, but maybe they can hear that and kind of start there from the beginning. We obviously have a lot of startups in this space, a lot of new technologies coming online. And as you, again, have gone through this a few times, I'm curious, just from your perspective, what increases a startup's odds of survival in climate tech specifically, especially in physical tech?
The odds of a startup, I think you'll hear good investors say this too, is when you're investing in a startup, you're really investing in the team. And its ability to solve problems. We're all looking at problems in a different way and trying to produce solutions that haven't been done before. And really, your odds are up to the strength of that team that you build. So it's super, super critical to focus on the team, focus on the expertise you need to carry with you and the partnerships you need to carry with you. But ultimately, it's that ability and that DNA that you need to build into the team of solving problems and being dynamic and facing challenges head on, not running away from the problems. I think that's so critical, and I think that it's also what makes it very cool to be part of a startup, because that it really is about the team and building and growing that team. You end up with a really strong team, and it's amazing what you can achieve and the energy that you get every day out of it. It's what drives me to come into work is working with the team that we've built. And it's something to be proud of, right?
Most definitely. I love that focus on people and the team, right? And I think sometimes people lose sight of that, but how important, how critical that is to have the right people. And you can see it. You can see it in sports. You can see it in business. You can see it in everything. So if you have that group that's really just bought in, and man, it's difficult, it's hard, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out together. We're here together. We're going to solve these problems. We're going to keep pushing forward. I think that's such a key fundamental part of that. And so I love you highlighted that. Before we wrap up, I want to zoom out a little bit, talk about the broader moment we're in and how you personally think about the future. So we're in a strange moment where, AI is attracting massive investment while clean tech sometimes feels, I don't know, a little overshadowed, if not, or you gets sort of back and forth messages sometime, although I think those are in it. We see it up and to the right and it's moving forward. Thinking about that, sort of like, AI coming in, all that. So how do you view this shift? Like, what goes through your mind when you think about that?
Yeah, certainly been through waves of this in different startups and the hype cycles that occur and the headwinds and tailwinds you have in the investment community and getting funding for different endeavors. And I remain very optimistic about what we're working on here at Electra. I know that we saw a lot of funding changing for different climate tech incentives. I think we've seen an increase in funding for things like AI, things that are consuming more energy to produce AI products and computing, data centers, and these things. But I think that at the core, we're still working on the right problem. And we're producing the right solution, and it's the right problem because not just because of greenhouse gas emissions, not just because of the climate, but also because we're just producing a better solution that generates less waste, and we're touching it in different parts of the value chain. So I think that where some technology will struggle is if you're producing a sort of myopic or singular value proposition. If you can have a more broad interest and more broad impact in the industry, that's what draws me towards optimism. And I really do think a lot of our customers on both sides, we've had great partners and steelmakers that are still very interested in the product that we're developing. And we have great partners at the mining companies that are still very interested in making better use of the materials at their mines. And this solution that we're developing really still addresses and still provides a solution there. And we still see that interest. Things seem a little weird and shaky, and there's hype cycles for sure and differences in political climate. But overall, I think we're going after a solution that is robust to those things.
Yeah, I agree. A lot to be optimistic about and hopeful for. I think everything's moving in the right direction. I always tell people don't worry too much. It's going to be okay. We're going to get there. We'll figure it out. So thinking about that too. So you've been a young engineer starting out. What advice would you give to other young engineers or professionals who want to build careers in clean energy, but maybe just feel uncertain about where to start?
Yeah, I think, if I were to give myself some advice, 15, 20 years ago, I think personally, I would have told myself not to be afraid to fail. And look at failure in a different way. Really, failure, if you're learning from it, it's okay. It's okay to fail if you're learning from it. It's going to make you wiser and stronger moving forward. And it also make you appreciate the success that you have when you get it. Yeah. And so I think for me, it's, don't be afraid to jump in and take the risk and fail, because that really is an opportunity to learn and grow. And I think sometimes, especially in engineering disciplines, there's always a right and wrong answer, and it's like math, right? It's either right or wrong, and you did it right or wrong. If you're growing in your career, doing it wrong is okay. You'll be better for it. So take the chance, take the risk, and just be ready and open yourself up to the opportunity to learn and develop.
Yeah, great advice there. I think great advice for anyone. I love the focus on you just embracing failure and using it as a teacher. I've told my daughter that before. She's a great soccer player. I told her early on, I'll remind her now of if you see somebody that's better than you at a skill or something, it just means they failed at it more times than you. That's it. Simple as that. they've just gone through that failure more times and to be on the other end of it. But it applies to everything that we do as well too in life, and likewise. Really like that advice a lot. Let me ask you this too. So thinking about just into the future, if Electra succeeds, at full scale, how will the world look different in 20 years if that happens?
Yeah, what a wonderful world it would be. I think in order for us to succeed in our mission, it's not this that we develop this technology, but also that we deploy renewable energy to feed this technology. The process for making iron is energy intensive, and we've been using fossil fuels for good reason to do that. But if that's going to change, we need more sources of energy to replace that fossil fuel, and our technology is part of the solution. But we really do need more sources of energy to feed that solution in order to really realize its full and true potential. When we're successful, I think what that looks like is a wide range and broad range of energy sources that we are accommodating and working with to make our product for steelmaking. I think that mining will be more efficient. The footprint of a mine will be lower. Old mines that didn't have use before, and mineral resources that are sort of abandoned can have new use and value. And so I think overall efficiency across a wide range of today's operations will just improve. And I think it's pretty exciting to see how that will go, where in the world it'll impact the most. But that to me is what I think of. I also think of driving an electric vehicle with our iron in the steel of that car and being pretty happy driving.
Yeah, I love it. Great long-term vision. Really what makes this work feel meaningful, I think, is you're able to vision those into the future and what that's going to look like and the impact that it will have as well too. So I love that. Final question, just I'll leave it to you. Any other things you want to share, things you didn't get to share, piece of wisdom, sort of anything you want to leave with the audience as we close?
No, yeah, I think that something to stress, and at least in my career, and something that I've really enjoyed is just the team dynamic and finding great leadership. Our founder and CEO, Sandeep, is someone that I know I've come to respect and admire in my interactions with him and seeing him grow as a leader. And it's really what drew me out of my job and into a garage was that leadership. And so I think the core values that he brings forward, a focus on the team and on people and on growth and professional growth and a focus on the team dynamic is a really just a healthy atmosphere to be in. And if you can find it, hold on to it because it's a ton of fun and it's really, really rewarding. I think that throughout my career, I searched in various startups and found different team dynamics. And this has just been an incredible journey for me. And I hope other people can find the same.
Yeah, it's awesome. Powerful note to end on. I love that. We'll leave it there. But Kevin, thank you for such a thoughtful and grounded conversation. It's rare to hear someone speak so clearly about both the technical and human side of building something that truly matters. For our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it with someone who cares about the future of clean energy, and leave us a review as well, too. It helps more than you might think. And with that, thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.
This episode of Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy, was brought to you by Lee Group Search. If you enjoyed today's discussion and are looking to recruit top talent for your company or find your next career opportunity in the renewable energy sector, visit leegroupsearch.com. Let's continue driving the future of clean energy together. Until next time, keep pushing toward a greener future.